You know, when I was a lot younger, I was taught that patience was key. Slow and steady wins the race. But now, at the end of my life, I currently am looking at these last 2 weeks with the Mets, and I'm really starting to push that point to its full capacity. This has been absolute torture. But otherwise, welcome to episode 4 of the Mets Weekly Podcast. Welcome to 60 minutes of brutal honesty, Mets fans. Let's go. For those of you who don't know, or for those of you who do, y'all know the drill by now. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already for live streams, shorts, and also additional weekly videos. We just surpassed 1,000 subscribers, so thank you guys so much for that. Follow us on TikTok, follow our brand new Twitter, follow all of us individually. The links are in the description. Also, a reminder that you also can listen to this podcast on 8 different listening platforms. So let's just skip the intros and just dive right in to the whole situation, because I think we all know what we all want to talk about. Let's dive into the never-ending saga. Correa Watch has now reached day 17, and for when this is posted, it would be day 18, as the negotiations between Correa's camp and the Mets have raised the same concern that the Giants had initially. So let's just go over the cliff notes. An initial report came out a week ago that Correa's camp was not interested in renegotiating the terms of the 12-year, $315 million contract. There were also some reports that the Mets and Correa agreed to a new contract, but they were just waiting for the MLBPA approval, but that was deemed inaccurate. Over the last 72 hours, it was reported that Correa has been in contact with 1 or 2 other teams, one being his most recent team that he played for, the Minnesota Twins. Then the most recent piece of news, the ever-so saint of wisdom, Andy Martino, said that the Mets are currently very frustrated with the negotiations and have considered walking away if events go even more south.
I mean, it really has just gotten to the point where it's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the Mets, we were on the initial impression that the Giants were just trying to back out of the deal. The Giants got cold feet. They were scared. They didn't actually want to spend this kind of money. Well, don't worry. Steve Cohen's not afraid of anything. He'll spend that money. He'll take the risk. Boris said there's nothing wrong with Carlos. He's totally fine. This isn't a totally fine thing. I mean, with how badly it seemed that Steve Cohen wanted this guy, how important he said that signing Carlos Correa is, for it to drag on this long, whatever is going on with his leg, his ankle, his foot, whatever, it's a big deal. And I think that the whole process of how free agency is negotiated and handled is flawed. The way that this whole foot thing, you only know when you sign the guy and you have to do all these other things. That's when you find out. Medicals, because this isn't a physical. This is medicals. The guy could do everything physically. That's what a physical is. These are a player's medicals, their file. When you look at Carlos Correa's medicals, you see something going on with the old surgery he had from way back when. Those kind of things should be accessible to teams before you even get this far. Because I don't understand how the Giants and the Mets got this far in the negotiation process. It looks like it's a totally done deal. Giants have a press conference scheduled, all that, to be like, I'm not so sure anymore. That's not how free agency should be. That is such advantage player compared to team, because all of a sudden now the team's like, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, this isn't a good deal for us. And they don't find out to the last minute where they've already set an expectation for the fan base. They've set an expectation for everybody else. And now the Mets are in this holding pattern, because we talked so much in the past couple of podcasts with Correa. Oh, if the Mets sign Correa, Escobar gets moved. If the Mets sign Correa, Beatty goes to left field. It's like all these other things that the Mets can or might do, they're waiting on the announcement with Carlos Correa. So it's holding up a lot of different things in what they want to do right now. And it's just overall very frustrating, because just like another day goes by and still no resolution one way or the other. And it's like you can't – the way these off seasons have gone in the Cohen regime and everybody just linking the Mets to everything, you can't trust anybody. No matter what report you read from whatever reporter you want to name, you can't believe anything, because we saw it with DeGrom. We've seen it with everybody. It looks like they're going to get the guy, then they don't get the guy. It looks like they're not going to get the guy. I know where they get him. Who knows at this point? What is Boris leaking? What is the Mets front office leaking? I personally am surprised, because when the Giants thing fell through, they ran to the Mets and they said, forget you, Giants. That's it. I am shocked that Scott Boras has let this go on this long. I feel like, knowing Scott Boras, he would just be like, oh, no, we're going somewhere else. And then that's it. And the Mets would be out of the running. So I'm just very surprised at how long this has taken. And it's just been overall very, very frustrating for everybody. I mean, no doubt about it. But just the whole way the situation is handled, I don't know how much longer Correa's camp is willing to be patient with.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. Like, 17 days. I mean, what is going on? I, at this point, just want an answer one way or the other. Obviously, I want Correa to be a New York Met. And I know a lot of people at this point have also said the other side, where if it's taking this long, clearly something is wrong with him and don't sign him. I'm sorry, but you're not going to sell me on Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez taking enough strides this year to make up for the offense that you would be losing on not bringing in Correa. Like, you got to get this deal done. Like, I will deal with the repercussions later, okay? Steve Cohen's got the money. It might hurt 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the line. It may never actually hurt. I mean, let's be honest. He's 28 right now. By the time he's 38, 39 years old, it's probably going to be a bad contract regardless of whatever the hell is going on with his ankle. You need this guy in your lineup. You need this cherry on top in your offseason. Otherwise, you're looking at the same lineup as last year, which wasn't terrible. Third in runs scored, fourth in runs scored, somewhere around there. But how much of that is sustainable? I really don't know. You got some career seasons at a couple guys. You got a lot of, as Steven Strider, like Spencer, whatever his name is, Strider, like to say, lucky hits, which, in some ways I can say he has a valid point, but not always. I think you want to get this bat because it's going to put your team over the top. And honestly, at this point, I'd just like to see it get done. I would stay with that contract if you can get some of these, very specific medical negotiations involved in it, whatever they're working on with the lawyers. But I'm just fed up at this point. It's typical Mets to have this happen. Even with Steve Cohen, it seems things are never truly easy.
This has been the most exhausting 2 weeks because, we like to cover a lot of different off-season stuff on here. And even though there are some different points we can branch out to, this has pretty much put the Mets' entire offseason on pause for 2 weeks. And those 2 weeks may look like a small little sample of guys signing, but in the offseason, it can go very quick, especially when we saw, like in the winter meetings, a lot of transactions go on in the winter meetings, and it can go just as quick outside of them. Like Tony just said, I don't care what's going to happen in 6 years. I really don't care about what's going to happen in the back end of the contract. And I've said this way too many times. You're here to win now. You signed Justin Verlander. You signed Max Scherzer. You brought in all of these guys for the short term to win right now. Do I care about what happens in year 6 of the contract? Not at all. I don't care right now. I really don't. If he gets injured, he gets injured. But from what I see, this team hasn't won a World Series in 36 years. I'm not going to be worrying about what he does in 7 years from now if I have a piece of jewelry on my finger.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, let's get this out the way. This whole idea that, you have Beatty and Alvarez to make up for Correa, that's false, because the best version of this Mets team is with all 3 of them in the lineup. You could have Correa at third, you could have Alvarez catching, not DHing, catching, and then you could have Beatty in left field or DH. And it's just like, the other thing too is that when it comes to Carlos Correa, if you're so concerned that at some point his leg is just going to snap, it's just going to fall apart, you only have one leg left. I mean, that's what they're making this whole injury history sound like. Guess what? You could DH the guy a lot if need be. If Escobar is still going to stay on this team, if Escobar is going to DH against lefties anyway, he could play third and Correa could DH.
It's not like anybody's competing for the DH role down the line on this team.
Exactly. It's not like you have a guy, like you didn't lock up a DH for 5 years, $100 million. You didn't do anything like that. You could also have Beatty play some third and Correa could DH. You could also just give Carlos Correa a bunch of days off altogether. That's fine. Who cares? As long as he's there for the big games, that's all that really matters. If you need to nurse him, whatever else it is, all these rest days, DH him, don't run out ground balls, I don't care. Keep the guy healthy because you're just so worried that his leg is not going to hold up for the whole contract. Rest him, ease him in, do whatever little things you have to do to make sure that the injury, if it happens as late as possible, because he doesn't need to play 160 at third base. Even if you got to put Guillorme out there a couple of days, so be it. No big deal. As long as he's there in the big games, as long as that bat is there, that is what the Mets need if they want to succeed. They can't go with this whole philosophy. It's like you said earlier, you don't sign Verlander and all these guys just to kind of back out of it. You went way over the tax. If you're going to go over to win it all, go over to win it all, because before they signed Correa, a lot of the critiques was this is basically the same team. This is just a lot of replacing parts and things like that. Correa was a true upgrade on offense and defense. So he was just of massive importance to really changing everything about this team. Everything about it. Defensively, batting behind Alonso, a proven winner, a guy who's done it in the postseason. Carlos has all of that. So you need to get it done. And even if it means he only plays a certain amount of games and you rest him, you DH him, whatever, that's totally fine because it still will be worth it in the end.
It's not something that I'm going to take lightly if this does fall through, because you look at this, it's like, again, like Frank just said, what upgrades did they make offensively this offseason to a team, once again, like we said, which we go all the way back to, one hit in an elimination game. One hit. So what was your biggest offensive upgrade this year? Danny Mendick. That's it. So I don't want to hear that, we have Escobar. We have Beatty. Sure, you do. It's true. But this puts you over the top. It really, really should not be taking this long from what we've heard. Again, this is what we've heard from an injury that he re-aggravated from 2014. And that's why they're hesitant to give out these long years or all these contract terms. Well, let me also point to another situation, and this is not similar to Correa, but there's also another guy you signed long-term named Brandon Nimmo. And that guy, he's had quite a few injuries in his career as well. I don't care about the back end of the contract. I don't. And again, if this is a lot more extreme than people think it is, and there's something that they're not telling us, but from what the reports we are saying, if it takes 12 years, it takes 12 years to get him here. Because we're just hearing this was a 2014 injury that he may be aggravated this year, but he didn't miss any time for. It's either there's something they're not telling us, or this is just getting held up for absolutely no reason.
My hopes were so high when they did get him, and now to have it ripped away from you sucks. I know sometimes you have to look at things in life and say, well, it's for the better. But I'm sorry, it's not for the better. Maybe in the long term, if this does persist and become an issue 8 years from now. But like you said, in 5-6 years, if I get that hardware right here on this ring finger, then I don't care. It's been 36 long years, and this guy puts this team over the top. They need to get it done. They made no upgrades to the offense. Danny Mendick, I'm sorry, I'm not even counting that as an upgrade. He's probably not even going to be on the big league roster. You still have Darren Ruff on this team. I am not a fan of Daniel Vogelback, as everybody knows. This offense cannot compete with the Braves offense, which we saw last year, and now you can't compete with the Phillies offense now that they brought in Trey Turner and are likely going to be firing on all cylinders like they were in the playoffs last year. No guarantee, but you have to get this deal done. Don't try to sell me on Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez making up for not having Carlos Correa. Don't tell me about September for Eduardo Escobar. Don't even try to tell me, well, they swung a trade for Liam Hendricks and Eloy Jimenez. You could do all those things, have all of those things, plus Carlos Correa. That's what they got to do. You don't sign 40-year-old Justin Verlander to a 2-year deal, and you don't sign 38-year-old Max Scherzer for these last 2 years looking toward the future. You've kept the prospects. You've continued to draft You have all of that going for you. Forget about the money in the future and go and try to win right now. And that means bringing in Carlos Correa.
I mean, it's just like the constant investment into these lottery tickets that some Mets fans have, and this whole mentality. They went pretty deep into pitching this offseason. They did a fantastic job with pitching, bringing in some pitching options, young arms, veteran arms, guys that can come in here for short term and also have years of control. So why half-ass it with the offense? That was the main problem towards that stretch of the season that kind of just had them kind of just drift off to sleep in September into the postseason. There isn't really a better option than this. It's all been talked about. Correa needs the Mets and the Mets need Correa. Absolutely. So what's the damn holdup? I don't understand what it is. And maybe there's something they're not telling us, but this is getting exhausting. We continue to count these days, as I said, day 17 and possibly day 18 tomorrow. What else is there to do? Because players that are still on the market could be gone that the Mets have been interested in. This has been one of those off-season pausing type of situations, and they're not going to sleep until there is some kind of resolution. And hopefully the next time in episode 5 of this podcast, we will have an answer. But right now, it's still a constant saga and just a staring contest between Correa's camp and the Mets.
The only way long term, it's kind of a win-win for everybody, is if next year the Mets they walk out of this, next year Manny Machado opts out, they sign him. Is his ankle okay? We won't know until you get his medicals, because no one ever knows until the deal is pretty much done. I mean, that's the only thing they could look at, where they still get a really good third baseman long term whose leg works. That's pretty much it.
And even with that, you're still burning a year of Verlander and Scherzer in that process.
Like, for me, there's no way of making this work for me. I mean, like, you've got to get Correa. Like, Manny Machado's like, what, 33 now? Like, I don't want if we get him next year, okay, I guess. But like, Correa's 28. He's already in the fold here. Just get it done. Get it done. You have this small window with Verlander and with Scherzer. Where are the next 2-3 big starting pitching prospects coming from the Mets farm system? Like, they're not there. They're non-existent right now. So, like, go try to win these next 2 years with Correa and Lindor and Alonso and McNeil in their prime.
And let's also not forget, this 2-year frame, you also have McNeil and Alonso will be free agents after the next 2 years. So this is your frame right now. Do it now. If it takes giving 12 years to Carlos Correa, by all means do it. That's just regarding of that whole situation. If this leg thing was just about 2014 and this whole thing was, in the past or whatever. If there's concerns right now, let's say if he comes to the press conference in crutches, that's a different story. But I will say that from what we're what we're seeing, I'm fine giving him 12 years. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, from what I'm seeing, I'm okay giving him 12 years right now because of an injury back in the minor leagues that he reactivated, and he never had an injury in his major league career related to it. What the fuck is the holdup?
Dude just played 90% of his team's games in the last 3 years. Get it done. Sign it.
I just get bad Kumar Rocker flashbacks where the Mets drafted him, looked like it's done deal, Kumar's here, and then, again, same with free agency, then they see the medicals and they're like, oh, you know what, maybe we can't do it, it's too risky. And they walked out of that. So, I mean, again, this is a bigger, deal, but still, it's like they've done something similar to this before. So they will walk out if they don't like a deal.
That was one of my initial thoughts when this entire thing started. Because I was like, okay, I don't trust this team with one of these, physicals thing. Again, different front office, Sandy Alderson falling asleep at the wheel. What else is new? But I think it's just getting so exhausting at this point. It's going on to day 17. And like we've said, and like we just said, we're surprised that Boris has let this lead on for so long. But you also kind of get it where no one has money like Steve Cohen, and he's probably not going to get an offer anywhere else. I personally think that whether the Mets being frustrated or Correa being talked to by other teams, it looks like Boris leaks, and it looks like leaks from both sides to pressure each other, because we're still seeing reports about it more, still likely to happen. But one phone call can pretty much change everything that goes on in an instant. And maybe it's possible that Correa signs with the Mets before this podcast even comes out, and maybe it's possible that the Twins just swoop in the next 24 hours before this podcast comes out, or maybe we're just waiting another week. So we just don't know what's going to happen. We're just hearing mixed reports from Heyman and Rosenthal just going out at each other with source wars. We're seeing unofficial Twitter accounts put in their 2 cents, and it's just been a constant, just exhausting, overwhelming last 2 weeks. I mean, just it's put the entire offseason on pause, and it's so frustrating because you still have things you have to do to make a 26-man roster that is ready to contend for the playoffs and possibly be a World Series. So as the Mets bullpen currently stands, they have a very reassuring back end: Edwin Diaz, David Robertson, Brooks Raley, and Adam Ottavino, but there's still 4 spots to fill in that bullpen. The Mets have really emphasized pitching additions this offseason with minor league deals, waiver claims, value trades, etc. On top of that, they've also been linked to other relievers on the trade market, such as Liam Hendriks and Alexis Diaz.
Obviously, the Liam Hendriks trade idea has been put on hold, as we've said. It's hard not to factor in this Carlos Correa saga without, into everything that we're going to talk about today. I can't see them making a trade for Liam Hendriks or any other member of the White Sox or any other member of any other team, for that sake, without knowing what's going to happen here with Carlos Correa. I don't know. We haven't heard much about the Hendriks thing in a couple weeks now, and I think that, again, is partly because of the Correa situation. But, Knebel still out there, if I'm not mistaken, so that would be nice. So far, really got to like the idea of Raley, Robertson, and Ottavino leading up to Edwin Diaz. It seems like Drew Smith at this point in time has a lock on one of these spots, and maybe Bryce Montes de Oca is going to be in that mix as well. Personally, as I've always said, I want the name brand relief pitchers in there. You could have 1 or 2, guys that are coming up from your system, and you kind of roll the dice with them and hope that they pan out. But that's really what we did with Drew Smith. Before him, with the dude, can't think of his name. Whatever, you could cut this
Robert
part
Gazelman.
out. Oh yeah, the Gazelmans of the world. The who's the guy that hit Reese Hoskins? That was terrible.
Jacob Rhyme. Oh my God.
Who? What's his name?
Jacob Rhyme.
We've done it before with the Jacob Rhames of the world, with those guys. Like, it obviously hasn't panned out so far. So give me the guys that have been in the league, that have done it before, and so far a pretty good, solid bridge to get to Diaz with Robertson and Raley and with Ottavino in there. But I'd love to get one more, whether it be Knebel, whether it be trading for Liam Hendriks. But no more Joely Rodriguez's, please. No more of these guys that were working on Wall Street 2 weeks ago. Please, you gotta get deeper in this bullpen.
As far as the bullpen, a lot of the guys have kind of flown off the market since the last time we talked about this. Obviously, Liam Hendriks is the guy you have the most confidence in, because other than that, most of these guys are not signed yet for good reason, other than Andrew Chafin. I guess his market is still just ridiculous as far as the asking price. Rightfully so. Anytime you have a lefty reliever who's been good year after year, that will usually raise up the price. So other than that, you're looking at a lot of these veterans, a lot of guys who are coming off injuries like a Knebel. I mean, a lot of these other veterans who they've had down years. We look at your Will Smiths and some of your other guys, like, who would ever think, oh my gosh, Aroldis Chapman's been a free agent for so long? There's a reason. He's not the Chapman he used to be. So there's just a lot of these guys that are left. They're just older relievers. So if the Mets want to take a flyer on one of these guys, they could. The youngest guy out here is Alex Reyes, but we know he's had his struggles. So most of these guys are free agents. It's for a reason. So because all these other guys, they don't check all the boxes, that's why Liam Hendriks looks like the best fit for the team.
We still don't really know what the answer is with Andrew Chafin. We still haven't really heard much from him. and that's kind of weird because he was the top flight lefty.
I mean, is his ankle going to fall off too, and we don't know? Like, does he have some
Maybe.
secret medicals as well? Is there something in the mustache? Like, I mean, what's going on?
This is weird because you don't know if they're going to just stay internal and they're just going to actually like put trust into some of these guys that they claimed off of waivers, rung the bell for Corey Knebel since the beginning. But it doesn't look like there has been any talk about him, the Mets getting him, or any other team getting him right now as he comes off from injury. I think that one of these spots is either going to go to one of Tyler McGill or David Peterson, who do not get put into the rotation. I'm not really comfortable with either of them in the bullpen as of right now. I would love for them to just please replace Drew Smith. If it is in a Hendricks trade, it'd be nice to have another brand name, like Tony said. I mean, Jeff Brigham is another guy. He's a very big Hefner arm, so that's definitely something you can look out for. I really hope Eliezer Hernandez is not on this roster as well. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I mean, Steven Ridings is another one, throws very hard, never healthy though. There's some pieces that they did bring in that could be, the final guy they put in as the eighth reliever they put in to come in at low leverage and maybe work their way into Buck Showalter's circle of trust. But there is still some moves that they do need to make to add to this bullpen. I didn't like them relying on Edwin Diaz and Adam Ottavino as much as they did. There may be four guys you can rely on into that bullpen. They can't be the only four guys. There's still other spots when you have a shitty start from one of these question marks in the back end of the rotation. So among the Twitter universe freakouts, this also includes the Fangraphs projections of Kodai Senga. Depth chart projecting system has posted the 29-year-old Japanese pitcher at a 5.14 earned run average, a 4.72 fielding independent pitching, and striking out just 19.3% of batters in 114 innings pitched in his rookie year. Now, a few weeks ago, Senga did sign a 5-year, $75 million contract with the Mets, slotting him into the projected number 3 in the starting rotation behind Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer.
As an old man who tries to not spend too much time on Fangraphs and projections like that, I don't really care, honestly, because I don't know what any of that stuff even means. I don't want to know. I'm an old man. I just want to watch my baseball and look at ERA and batting average and things like that. So whatever the projections are, they are. I don't care about projections. I care about what actually happens. If Kodai Senga, Taiwan Walker's his way to a good ERA and gets lucky, that's good with me. As long as the Mets are winning ball games, like Spencer Strider said, they got lucky with hits. That's fine. I'll take lucky. I just want to win games. That's all I care about. For me, when it comes to Senga, I'm more concerned about just the fact that this is his first time in the major leagues. It's not what the computer says. It's just the first time he's in major leagues. There's always concern with anybody like that you bring in. I was more in the Evaldi camp. I would have preferred going Nathan Evaldi, someone who's a little more, I kind of know what he is. I've seen him do well in the major leagues. Senga, I have no idea. So you could give me whatever projections you want. I'll react when I see it, because you would hope that with all these upgrades the Mets have made in the analytics department, it was a big priority for Steve Cohen that maybe their nerds would know, maybe this isn't a good idea. So how come the Twitter nerds know, but the Mets nerds don't? I mean, that's my thing. So projections are what they are. Carson, you can explain the criteria, and maybe they're looking too much at how much he walks batters and things like that. But for me, let's see what happens when he's out there. I was a little concerned because it's the first time in the major leagues, but it is what it is at this point. He's already here. All the other free agent starters, for the most part, are signed. We'll get to the fifth starter later. But, I mean, it is what it is at this point. I can't worry about what hasn't happened yet because I've never seen this guy in the major league mound.
I said it when the Mets signed Senga that you never truly know what you're getting out of a pitcher that's never pitched in Major League Baseball. I don't care how many professional seasons they have in Korea or Japan, wherever it may be. Japan, obviously, the Nippon League is clearly the closest in competition to Major League Baseball outside of what might you find in Cuba, because we've seen so many people come from there and perform at a high level here in Major League Baseball immediately. But that all being said, I can't put too much weight into what Zips says about Kodai Senga. And I don't say that because they have him rated poorly, because if they came out and said he's going to have a 1.75 ERA, I wouldn't have bought that either. I think they had to go one way or the other. They could have done that or hedged their bets and went somewhere in the middle. I think we all believe at his best, Kodai Senga is going to be a sub-3, somewhere in the 2.9 to 3.4 ERA area. That's the best case scenario. Worst case is kind of what I think that they're projecting. It's a little alarming, no doubt about it. But again, if they had went the other way with this and projected Kodai Senga to have a 2.44 ERA, I wouldn't have expected or bought that either. So for me personally, like Frank said, I'm an old man myself. I want to go out and see what he actually can go do on a major league mound for the first time and evaluate from there. The good news is there was an opt-out after the third year. Even if he chooses not to opt it out and it hasn't panned out by that time, he's not committed a tremendous amount of money. I don't think it's going to hurt the Mets. That's too forward-thinking for me anyway. Focusing just on this year, I think he will perform a lot better than what Fangraphs is actually projecting for.
Oh, man. This caused like a way bigger freak out than it really should have. Fangraphs is a very dynamic type of projection system. They do it based off of volume. They do it based off of basically from what their scouting scores does it from, especially from international players. They definitely had a lot of different tabs on Kodai Senga. From what I'm seeing from Fangraphs scouting report on Kodai Senga for all these international prospects is that it looks a little outdated from what their his arsenal. And the last time I checked, what Fangraphs says about Kodai Senga is that his fastball sits up to 97 miles an hour. So I don't think that this is full on updated, but from what I'm seeing, I kind of get it in the thoughts of when they say the control and command issues. What really does spook me is kind of the command. The fact that they are projecting him to give up 18 home runs this season in 114 innings, which kind of sucks. I kind of see it with those obvious command issues and those obvious command concerns of his fastball and, the lack of depth in his arsenal. From what I saw just initially, like I said, he looks like a reliever to me. And that's just a different type of situation. And I don't know if you have a guy with a lot of reliever ceiling and a lot of reliever tendencies to be at your number 3. Again, it's a risk. We already know it's a risk. We don't know what the hell he's going to be. It's definitely caused a lot more of a freak out than they thought. They also have him coming out of the bullpen 10 times this year as well. It looks like they're projecting him to be more of a reliever because of the volume of 114 innings, and it's kind of just like fluctuated over that sample, which is not what a reliever usually gets. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing, from what Fangraphs is seeing, he looks like a reliever to me, but Senga, I can't wait to see what this kid's got. Maybe he does prove them wrong, maybe he doesn't, but this is definitely going to be something interesting. Some of the Fangraphs projections definitely translate fairly well from other data in the actual major leagues. This guy was in a different league, different balls, different setting, different everything. So this is going to be definitely interesting. I kind of get it, but it's definitely going to be a crapshoot. We don't know what's going to happen.
First of all, just read a report earlier this week that Billy Epler has been scouting Kodai Senga. The Mets have been for a number of years now. So this was not an impulsive, shiny object coming from a different league kind of situation where the Mets pounced on it. It sounds like they've done their due diligence on him. So that's a great sign for me. Secondly, looking at Fangraphs, their projections from last year and what actually happened. Here's a couple of names let me throw at you. Yasmani Grandal predicted for a 128 OPS plus. His was 64. Joey Gallo projected for a 131. His was 79. Max Muncy projected for 135. His was 96. They make mistakes even on the biggest names in baseball. So don't take this for gospel. Don't take this for the perfect absolute formula, because that's not what this is. Yes, they make a lot correct, but they also get a lot wrong. So don't think that Kodai Senga is going to be absolute trash just because Fangraphs put out a projection on.
Make an assumption that he's going to be trashed by Steamer. We care about Steamer. We don't care about Fangraphs, okay? Steamer is the Bible, and it goes by the full-on script of what's going to happen every single year. I'm sure they definitely predicted the Phillies going to the World Series. Speaking of starters, the Mets' top 4 starters look to be settled at Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Kodai Senga, as we recently mentioned, and Jose Quintana. But the 5 spot has a pretty deep debate going into spring training. The trade rumors of Carlos Carrasco don't regularly rule him out completely yet. You have Tyler McGill and David Peterson standing as the top replacement options, with outside possibilities such as Joey Lucchesi, Eliezer Hernandez, and Jose Budo, including some other long shots, Josh Walker and Denyi Reyes.
Yeah, I think in the case of at this particular moment in free agency with what's left on the free agent market, you're not looking at that much that's very appealing. Like, you have Walker, who we've seen as a Met before. I think he's someone he'd be better second time around going to Tampa, because Tampa could fix a lot of things that's wrong with you. I mean, Joe Ross is kind of young, but again, these aren't very appealing names. It's not like, oh my gosh, Mets are in a playoff series, Scherzer got hurt, but it's okay, like Joe Ross could step up. Like, that doesn't sound very exciting at all. And then as far as trades, it's tough. Anytime there's a good starting pitcher who's relatively young, we know they cost an arm, a leg, and maybe a couple more when it comes to trading. So it's hard to see them doing anything there, really. I think that we've talked about it kind of before with Escobar in the last episode, but for me, if I'm trading Carlos Carrasco, it needs to be a great deal. Like, I have to be getting something really good in return. I'm not the biggest on Carrasco this year in particular, as he's getting older and he has injuries and things like that. But I don't think they should just be giving away just to shed some salary and have a better tax bill. Because I think, like we talk about all the time, you can never have enough starting pitching. I think if anybody is going to get that 5th spot and like actually do something significant, it would be McGill. But that's assuming that he's healthy, he's able to bounce back and then stay healthy. I mean, that was the thing that was so frustrating with Tyler, is that he would come back and then just get hurt again. So I really want to see what happens, because we saw really good things from McGill, especially in the beginning of the year when he was throwing really hard. He was having these great starts, and people are comparing to DeGrom and things like that. But then we saw the bad McGill, where he got hurt and gave up a ton of runs, and he was just very inconsistent with his role and things like that. So I'm curious to see how he develops. But we know it's probably not going to be Pearson. He kind of is what he is at this point. He's going to get his strikeouts. He's going to walk his batters. Like, it's just what David Pearson is. And with Carrasco, I just think that when you get to that age and you have those injuries, you only get worse. So I can't have too high expectations for Carrasco. I think that at this point, since they didn't add any other pitchers, and like I said, I don't see them making a big trade for a pitcher, they're actually relying on Jose Quintana quite a lot, because he's basically going to be their 4, I think. And you're going to need at least 4 really good starting pitchers when it comes to postseason time, and not just that first round, but when you get to the championship round and things like that, and it's a 7-game series, you're going to need some more starters. So I think they're putting a lot of faith in Quintana. We'll see if that pays off. Jose Quintana was very good this year, but the past couple of years, he had been pretty rough. So I think there definitely is a bit of uncertainty going on there. But as of right now, there aren't that many great options left. They're like, oh, the Mets could sign this guy and that guy, and they could just trade Carrasco because they'll have these other guys. There really aren't those great options out there right now.
Last year, the Mets experienced a ton of injuries, partly due to Jacob deGrom, partly due to Max Scherzer, and they really paid the price for it. Carlos Carrasco is always going to be good for at least one injury listed, if not more. Who even knows what he is at this point, which is why I am not trading away from what I'm not going to say is a weakness, but it is a very sensitive part of this team, given the injury history of all of these guys. Verlander's up there in age, Scherzer's up there in age, Carlos Carrasco's up there in age. We just heard about the Fangraphs reveal on Kodai Senga. And then you got Jose Quintana, who had a very solid season last year, but 2021 was a disaster for him. So me personally, I am not taking away from what right now I think is a very fragile part of this team. David Peterson, he has shown to be up and down. And personally, I think we've all come to the grips with the fact that at his ceiling, he's a number 5 in your rotation. At his ceiling. Then you got Tyler McGill, who has flashed dominance, but really not since May of this year. Other than that, he's been on the injured list and clearly is not working out of the bullpen. So I'm keeping all of these names. And if you can go out and trade for a guy that could slot in as your number 5 in the case that one of these guys gets injured, great, because we've seen it over and over again. Carlos Carrasco with the hammy or a blister or whatever it may be. Justin Verlander, fine last year, but before that, obviously missed almost 2 complete seasons with the Tommy John and up there in age. Max Scherzer constantly with the barking oblique. You got to just have as many starting pitcher options as you can, because when you have to keep going to the scrap heap as they did last year, it's only going to hurt you more and more as the season goes on. And there's no more Trevor Williams to bail you out on this team anymore. There's no more Seth Lugo, even though they never really used him as a starter. He could have been an option at certain points over the last year or two, or even as an opener. He's gone as well. So you got to go get, for in my opinion, at the very least, a swingman like Trevor Williams to have as an insurance policy on this rotation, if not more, because we're going to have injuries. We all know you got to have at least 8 starting pitchers on your 40-man roster available, ready to step in on a day's notice, if not more, considering the age and fragility of this starting rotation.
Well, I'm giving the job to Tyler McGill straight up. That's just me, because I think that Carlos Carrasco does get moved because of him in this contract year. I don't think he's going to succeed out of the bullpen as much as people would actually think he's going to be. Again, it makes sense for them to get a little bit younger with the starting staff, moving Carlos Correa, but that most likely will only happen if maybe they turn it into a swingman arm like Trevor Williams, or they get 2 arms out of it that are younger and more controllable. I'm comfortable with moving Carlos Carrasco, even with this type of, this uncertainty, because, well, you're still facing the same problem that you're facing with, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. They get hurt. You're going to need him to be one of the backup pieces. And he's also old and injured a lot as well. So it's basically just skipping over another piece that could possibly be at risk for injury. And we all know that Carlos Carrasco, recently he began the season well, but down the stretch of that season, he showed his age a lot. He's had 2 major surgeries in his tenure with the Mets, a hamstring surgery after a torn hamstring, and then, of course, the elbow surgery he had last offseason. So it's a risk to think that this guy is actually going to hold up to the 160 innings that he's been able to pitch throughout his entire season. And we also saw those concerns coming from reports from the Mets front office before this entire Correa saga took over the entire offseason, kind of talking about how Tyler McGill and David Peterson were going to full on probably outpitch him, and they were concerned about the health of a 36-year-old Carrasco, which makes sense. Lucchese's on the outside looking in. I don't think he's healthy enough for that yet. I think he needs to have some bulk innings in the bullpen, whether it's starting in AAA. We've also talked about how maybe the Mets don't really like Joey Lucchese that much. This regime doesn't. It's very possible because they kind of just extended his rehab when he was fully healthy and ramped up, when they definitely could have used him down the stretch of the season with guys like Drew Smith and Joely Rodriguez just trudging along last year in the bullpen towards the end of the year. I think that Tyler McGill is the best design starter if he's healthy. If he can turn into a fastball cutter guy, that'd be nice. Stop using slider as much as he does, but that's a different story. We'll get an answer about this in spring training, but what we've seen with the Carlos Carrasco news and the McGill speculation of whether he's going to be a starter or bullpen piece, I think Tyler McGill succeeds the best as a starter.
2 things. First and foremost, really proud of us that none of us suggested Trevor Bauer. So good on us.
That's completely out of the question. I'm not even going to put it into the light of notice at all. Not at all. Complete
Great.
Distraction. Never going to happen.
Secondly, Steve Cohen has verbatim said that this team will be opportunistic when it presents itself. And one opportunity, and I'm going back to the well. I love this guy. His arm might be pastrami, but he had a nice comeback season. Shane Bieber going into his 2nd year here of arbitration. That $6 million figure could double to $12 million. He got back up to 200 innings pitched last year, 2.88 ERA. We already got the relationship with the Indians. We know that. Mark Shapiro over there. Why not? I go after that guy hard if he's going to be available sometime here.
I mean, Shane Bieber, he lost his velocity on his arm. He's always been a mid-90s guy, but I can tell you right now, I mean, he still has that effectiveness and he still has that fantastic spin efficiency that he used to have before that entire, what was it? Was it Tommy John or what did he have? Was it Tommy John? Something like that. He got hurt. He did something.
The strikeout percentage just dropped, and that's probably due to the velocity dropping. But the walk percentage has also dropped in half. So, I mean, he's found a way around this, which this is what we used to. I mean, I personally always used to complain about Noah Syndergaard. He could throw 105 miles per hour, and people were still squaring him up because that's all he tried to do. Shane Bieber has shown he's not just a thrower, he's a pitcher. He's lost the velocity, and while the strikeouts have dropped, that's natural with velocity going down. He's still found a way to cut walks in half. So something he's doing is working here.
I mean, when you're a starting pitcher and you know how to locate, you have more value than anyone towards the downstretch of a season of one of those big game pitchers that you need to back up your top aces. And we all know that Shane Bieber has definitely pitched to the ability of an ace before. So, I mean, I would not mind it. It might cost a haul, but he had quite the 200 innings last year. Wasn't, the top dog that he was, still good, still really good. And if you slot that into your number 3 or number 5, 4, move somebody down the depth chart, I wouldn't mind it.
I talked about in my video, like previewing the offseason, literally anybody from the Guardians rotation is cool with me. I mean, you want to give me McKenzie, Quantrill, Bieber, whoever. Literally, I'll take any of them. They're all just very appealing young arms that could really help out this rotation much more than a Carrasco and some of the other, like we said, Sean Reed Foley's of the world. So even if they don't budge on Bieber, I'd be like, okay, well, what about somebody else? Because Cleveland, I mean, we got Carrasco from Cleveland. They just tend to have that really good pitching lab of young arms where it just seems like a bunch of, like their bullpen, a bunch of guys you never heard of, they'll put up great numbers. So Cleveland, they have a lot of guys that can help you out, so not just him. And who knows? I mean, if Tony's going back to the well, I might as well go back to the well too. Maybe Tyler Mahle is available in another trade. If Minnesota, I mean, who knows what they're going to do? I still don't believe in them. I still don't think they're all that good. If Tyler Mahle is available in trade, I might consider that again, even though he finally got hurt this past year. So that was my biggest thing forgetting was that he never got hurt. Well, he finally did. So he's not as appealing, but those AL Central teams, because the AL Central is just so kind of, I mean, I don't want to use the words the kids use, but it's just not very good. You just got a lot of mediocre teams in there. Whether it is Chicago, we don't know what direction they're going. Minnesota, Cleveland, anybody. We'll take anyone from that division pretty much.
I think it's just a lot more important topic than people think it is, obviously, with the uncertainty with pretty much everybody in this rotation. I mean, you have certainty of what Jose Quintana can be, and I think that's like your stable option, your Bassett replacement. But again, he's had his struggling years as well, but you don't know what Kodai Senga is going to be. You don't know if Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer stays healthy, because once you put on a Mets uniform, your bone density basically drops like 10%. So I can say right now that it's definitely a lot more important for down the stretch of the season, because we saw it firsthand. Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer injured at the same time during last season, and they held up okay, but they were definitely dangling by a thread towards the end of the season and going into the playoffs. So with the pending addition of Carlos Correa, which who the hell knows if that happens at this point, it has definitely gone noticed that the Mets are most likely going to move Eduardo Escobar on the trade market. Escobar signed a 2-year, $20 million contract with the Mets last offseason that included a 3rd-year team option worth $9 million. Multiple teams, including the Marlins, White Sox, and Tigers, have all inquired about the 34-year-old infielder. The Marlins may have eased off recently, obviously signing Gene Segura. Thank you for doing that, keeping that asshole the National League East.
I mean, most of those teams are pretty bad. And the reason why they're bad, they have bad players. So I don't know why we would want bad players in return. But I think this is another one of those things where it's all contingent on Correa. And who knows, maybe they could have swung a trade with the Marlins if the Correa thing actually went through beforehand. So, I mean, whether it is the White Sox or the Tigers or the Rangers, whatever, they're not going to wait forever for you to be like, oh, don't worry, take your time. Once you guys have your deal with Correa, then we could talk about the trade for Escobar. Like, if they want to get another infielder or whatever, they're going to. So, I don't really see that working out in the Mets' favor too well if you just keep, waiting with Escobar, because then you're kind of just stuck with him. So that's another reason why they just got to get this Correa thing settled so that they could, if they want to do other stuff, they could actually do it and have certainty about exactly who's going to be on their roster and who isn't. Because, I mean, you're getting closer and closer to spring training where it looks like teams, they might kind of be wrapping up with what they're doing. So they may not be interested in a trade right now.
I've been on record saying I don't want to take anything away from the Mets' chances of winning a World Series this year or next year. We are in this little window right now with this starting rotation that you can do it. And this is pendant, of course, on the Carlos Correa situation. If he is signed, I still don't want to trade Eduardo Escobar because I think he makes a great right-handed platoon for the DH throughout the season, whether that's regularly or just for different stints throughout the year. I think he's a great guy to have off the bench that can play multiple infield positions. That all being said, Andrew laid it out really nicely last week. If it's including in a trade that gets you, say, Liam Hendricks, or I don't know if Eloy Jimenez is a part of this as well, where more prospects are going back to Chicago, then okay. But if you're just looking to trade Eduardo Escobar because you signed Carlos Correa, I don't agree with that. I think that he has a role on this team off the bench, playing a few times a week as the DH, pinch hitting. I think he can still be a big part of this team with Carlos Correa. So it, again, all is going to depend on how this saga finally plays out. But for me personally, I'm in no rush to trade Escobar, depending on what type of trade is actually presented to the Mets. Until I know, I can't really give you an answer without knowing what would potentially be coming back in one of these moves.
I mean, with the thought of the addition of Correa, this obviously brings up the thought of them possibly moving him. But I definitely disagree. I on them moving Escobar. I think that he's definitely limited no matter what, especially with some other infield options such as Beatty and Guillorme, who both can play third base, and other guys, past Correa. I understand that they definitely have the uncertainty coming off the bench, and maybe Eduardo Escobar is a good bench piece, but I'm not going to pay $10 million for somebody to sit on the bench if I can get that $10 million for two different players, or that with that $10 million, I can bring in Jerickson Profar, who can provide me even more flexibility. Granted, Eduardo Escobar could play the outfield. Hasn't played it that long. He has not played it as of recent, and he's getting older, and I don't really think that they're going to really trust him to do that. The outfield depth may be thin right now, but I don't think they're going to get to that desperate measure yet. If you do include a prospect along with Eduardo Escobar, let's say if the Marlins check in on him, I mean, you could get one of their young pitchers. You did get two of their pitchers earlier this offseason in Jeff Brigham and Eliezer Hernandez, some controllable arms, maybe somebody that you could move at the deadline as well for other types of assets. So I think that Eduardo Escobar, yes, you could do a DH platoon, but I also think that Daniel Vogelbach could get moved as well. I just want one damn DH on this fucking team. And I also think that the influence of Danny Mendick here definitely is a lot more of a impact than people think he is. This is a major league contract that he did sign. Let's not forget. So he could be on the 26-man roster on opening day. And also, this is such an Epler bat. It's not even funny. Like we talked about Jerickson Profar being an Epler bat. This is like Epler to extreme. This is how you know if it's an Epler bat. He thrives on putting the ball in play, hits a lot of line drives, and plays multiple positions.
I've just seen too many injuries from this team over the last 2 years, where we were forced to watch Michael Perez catch and watching Carlos Sanchez play third base in meaningful games in August and September, which is why I don't want to move anybody that I know is at least a little above average of an MLB player, being Eduardo Escobar. Yes, he's making $10 million. Yes, he's on the bench, but the best teams in baseball do this. The Dodgers don't start Chris Taylor every single day. I mean, like, why roll the dice, have a hamstring pull from Jeff McNeil or Brandon Nimmo or Francisco Lindor, and have to play and scrape the bottom of the barrel of your 40-man roster, or go off of waivers and picking up these mid guys to have to play meaningful games late in the season when you have a guy like Eduardo Escobar already on the team?
It's a valid point. I mean, it is a valid point, but then you also have Beatty and Guillorme, who also could play those positions if there is an injury in the infield. You have all these other options. Like what I've said this like 7,000 times at this point. The bench pool right now, you have 9 different options. There's 3 infielders there. There's 3 DHs and 3 catchers. And then a catcher that may be a DH this year, which I don't want to happen. And then you also can add Danny Mendick, who can, play whatever position. He can't be the only utility guy they bring in. So I just think that it definitely brings out the flexibility. I think that Eduardo Escobar, coming into this age of 34, 35, he's pretty much established as a third baseman or a second baseman. I don't see this dude playing the outfield at all. He's in a contract year. He also has that team option that puts a lot more value on there. So if you could address other pieces, moving him the other way, you could. The Tigers maybe have some bullpen pieces that you can get some gems or something. I know Javi Baez could come back, make the Puerto Rican infield, move Jeff to left field, moving everybody to left field. He's definitely expendable in this situation. I definitely believe if they get Carlos Correa again, fingers crossed, but it's an expiring contract. He's not coming back long term. You might as well address other areas with Eduardo Escobar, with other options that can play third base behind Carlos Correa if he gets hurt. So let's get into some viewer questions that you guys sent to us. For those of you who want a Mets-related question answered, click the link in the description, fill out our form, name, question, and it could be featured in next week's episode of the Mets Weekly Podcast. So we'll do 2 questions as per usual. This one comes from Jackson. Favorite addition of the offseason so far? Non-Carlos Correa.
That's a tough one because if we're talking about addition or re-signing, I mean, that's kind of where it's all dependent. If we're talking about just someone who was not a Met last year, who is a Met this year, the guy I'm most excited about is David Robertson. He's a guy that I really just wanted for a long time. And I'm just very curious to see how, with getting Robertson back, it also changes what Ottavino does. So I'm just curious to see what this Mets bullpen looks like when Ottavino comes in the 5th inning, in the 6th inning. This could be a really nasty bullpen. You got Brooks Raley in there. So it's just they're all kind of one move pretty much. Getting Robertson becomes a better move because you got Raley, and getting Ottavino makes the Robertson move look even better. So it's just having that full, just 4 horsemen in the bullpen is just what I'm looking forward to the most, because it's just felt like year after year we talk about, what's the Mets' weakness? And Tony, I always say, it's the bullpen. It's the bullpen. You got all these guys who are no good, and now it's this year. It's wait a minute. The bullpen might actually be one of the strongest things about the Mets. So this is not something I'm used to saying. So I want to see what happens.
Yeah, 100%. Like what Frank was saying, it's hard to determine between who was here last year and got re-signed and new additions. And just like Frank also said, for years I've been screaming, no, this is not a strength of the bullpen. The bullpen is not a strength of this team. But a lot of Mets fans have always continuously said it. Now, yes, I am starting to feel that way. And I think a big reason for that is Brooks Raley, who I'm really excited about. Obviously, really nasty stuff, being in Tampa for a while, and the control on him going into, I believe, next year as well. Really, really happy to see the back end of this bullpen starting to shape up. And in my opinion, better than it has been. And I can't even remember the last time that we had 4 guys who on paper sound like you could go to anytime between the 6th and 9th inning, and you're going to feel pretty comfortable with a lead or a 1-run margin.
You stole my answer. I love Brooks Raley. This dude is disgusting. I don't think people realize how good this man is, because obviously looking past the Edwin Diaz and the David Robertson and Adam Ottavino, more brand names than you think it is, but this dude definitely went through 2 of the best pitching labs of the century, shall we say, at this point, with the Astros and the Rays. The most disgusting slider you will ever see, knows how to locate. I mean, this guy is nasty. He does everything, is such a versatile skill, and I can't wait to see it in New York. And I really hope that, maybe I'm hoping that he's the second best behind Edwin Diaz this year. That's what I'm expecting him to be. But obviously, we have these 2 veterans as well in this bullpen. And another one that I obviously want to say, which is a very underrated one, is Jose Quintana, because I think replacing the amount of innings that Chris Bassitt threw was definitely not going to be easy. And I can tell you right now that this is definitely a workhorse type of arm. I wouldn't say it's as big as Chris Bassitt is, but from what we were seeing on the starting pitching market, especially from the standpoint of Taijuan Walker getting $18 million a year for 4 years from the Phillies. What the hell? $13 million a year for 2 years. I think that was definitely a steal for somebody that can be durable at the end of the back end of your rotation. The second question being from Chris, the Mets fan. I think he's a Mets fan. What do you think an Alonso extension would look like? That's actually a really good question because, like we've said, there's definitely a short-term 2-year window right now, and that also includes Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso, who will both go to free agency in 2025.
It has been so far out of my mind re-signing or extending McNeil or Alonso. I don't know why, but I just haven't given it a lot of thought. Alonso is a 40 home run bat. There's no doubt about it. He could drive in over 120 RBIs each and every year. He's prone to slumps. We know that. And he can be infuriating. There can be a 3-week period where he can't touch a pitch and he's flailing at sliders in the left-handed batter's box, and it's infuriating. Every hitter goes through slumps. We know this. He's not the best first baseman. We know that as well. He's made some strides, but I think he's now reached his ceiling. He's going to be middle to below average in the pack of first basemen for the most part defensively. Right now, the Mets have Kevin Parada and Francisco Alvarez. Is Kevin Parada going to be the future catcher? Does Alvarez make strides and maybe Parada gets some looks at first base in the future? I think that's all too early to really have an idea about. But if you're just looking in terms of Pete Alonso, the player that he is right now, I could see somewhere around 8 years, $200 million. And I look at it with the idea of what Austin Riley got. Would you rather Austin Riley or Pete Alonso? Riley got 10 years, $211 million. We know the Braves use that voodoo magic, so we're probably not going to get the benefit of that doubt. But I wouldn't be paying more years or more money for Pete Alonso than Austin Riley's getting. In my opinion, Riley is a far superior player on both sides of the ball.
Hot take. I like it. I mean, he's definitely proven a lot. He is definitely one of the best third basemen.
Let me ask you, because Frank went googly eyes on me. If you had to pick right now, you're starting a team, you can pick between Alonso and Austin Riley, who would you pick?
It's not that. It's that you say significantly better. I mean, they're both good players. Like, okay, I'll take Riley, but I don't know about significantly better. That's quite a bit.
I think there's a few factors that go into it. Number one, that Riley's a third baseman, which is, in my opinion, a little more valuable. Secondly, he's way better defensively than Pete Alonso, than Pete Alonso is at their respective positions. Yeah. And, I mean, Riley hits for better average, better contact. He's a complete hitter in my opinion.
Well, there's a couple other things. There's a couple other factors when you're comparing Riley to Alonso. Number one, Riley plays in a launching pad in Atlanta. Riley is asked to do very little in that Atlanta lineup. He has amazing protection from top to bottom. Pete Alonso is asked to do everything. They will pitch around Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is actually one of the guys who saw the least amount of balls in the strike zone because they're like, why the heck will we face this guy? We could just face Darren Ruff after him anyway. So I don't think they're like the perfect comparison. I do agree that Riley's probably the overall, like everything considered, better player, but I don't think it's by that big of a margin.
From what I'm looking at, and this is not one of those like deep in depth things. They're somewhat close, but I'd probably give the edge to Riley, just like just by like barrel rate.
My thing, I wonder if they swap teams. How would we feel about them?
If you're talking about workload and like value to a team, it definitely goes to Alonso, in my opinion. But better player, it probably does go to Riley. If I were to look at just like projecting an AAV, right, just right now, it's about $23 million for Alonso. If I could get him for $23 million, I'd do it right now. 9 years, $200 million. It's something like that. Like that would be $23 million a year. I don't know, roughly. I don't know. What is that? $22 million a year. All right, I was close. Whatever. Math. I don't see this happening this offseason. If it's next offseason, maybe. I think he does hit the market, and I do think he deserves to hit the market. We know that Alonso does like being a Met. he expresses it a little too much. And I can say right now that he's definitely someone you want to keep long term. And it's definitely something to look at with a lot of these short-term contracts coming off the books. He definitely will be one of those guys that could be considered for it. But I don't think right now. I don't think it is this off season. I think it's in the back of everybody's mind right now. Maybe next off season, it's a possibility. The more question is probably McNeil, especially with how you do want to approach it. If you're looking at it from the value that he takes from offense and defense, if you're looking at him as a utility guy, or you're looking at him as a second baseman going into his mid-30s. But yeah, Alonso is something that I don't think they're going to look at this year, but next year is a possibility. But I would say that if you're looking at that AAV, it's probably around 23 to 25 million a year, depending on how long you go. Another way that you could model this is kind of like the Matt Olson deal, but a little bit longer.
And Olsen plays first, so it's probably a closer comparison. But then again, Olsen also has the Gold Glove in his resume at first base. But Alonso is probably the more prolific all-around hitter than Matt Olson. Matt Olson is more of just a power guy. I think Pete's a little more complete in that department, going more to all fields and things like that. But I think you're looking closer to Olsen. So Olsen got 8,168. So if they want to do like 8,175, 8,180, I'm good with that. I think that's perfectly fair. And I've said it for years, but Pete Alonso should have been extended a long, long time ago. You could have got him for an amazing deal, and that's what the Braves do. Everyone says, how do the Braves do this? They signed the guys young. If the Braves had let all these guys hit free agency, they would never be able to pull off the deals that they do. When you sign the guys young, you get great deals. I mean, that's just how it goes in baseball. But the Mets, they're waiting on Alonso. They're waiting on McNeil. They waited way too long on Nimmo. And that's why they got to overpay for these guys, because once you get to the free agent market and you see what these guys can actually get from some teams that are just crazy and have a bunch of money to spend and just overpay, then that's when you get into these contracts they don't like that much. So if they want to do what Atlanta's doing, you have to do it last year, the year before, or right now. Like, it shouldn't be all this keep putting off to next year. Let's put off to next year. Like, it's clear Alonso is a face of this team. It's clear that he's a really good player. He's not a one-year wonder or things like that. Just sign him already. I mean, you went this far over. If you're worried about like financial, like long-term financial flexibility, it's better to do it now when you have that cheaper AAV going forward. So I just don't understand why they've taken this approach.
I mean, it's just basically just the ownership we were under after that amazing rookie year that he had. I mean,
yeah, but we've now had Cohen. This is our third year with Cohen, and we still don't have the Alonso extension. I mean, that could have been one of the first things he did when he got.
We've also seen some holdouts between Alonso and the Mets after the arbitration hearings. So, it's possible that like they've talked to him before. It probably was the right thing to do that after 2019 year that Alonso and McNeil had. They probably should have said, okay, what do you guys want long-term so we can buy out these ARB years? Because they both, I guess they were considered rookie seasons. I don't know, McNeil, he was eligible rookie year, but like it didn't count against service time. So they're both the same free agent class. I really hope that they don't make this same mistake. Alvarez has this breakout. Like we've talked about this before. If this guy at an age 21 season becomes the rookie of the year campaign, one of the best hitters on your team, this high-profile prospect, the number one in the game, extend him now. Put 8 years in front of him, buy out the ARB years, and he'll still be a 28-year-old free agent. And that also goes for the same for Beatty as well. Well, it's time to get a pad and paper because it's time for Mets trivia. So here is how this works. I have 10 questions to ask. Tony and Frank are going to face off. They were going to write down their answers in silence, and we'll review them at the end. They'll give them about 30 seconds to write down their answer, and then we'll move on. If we do have a tie, I do have a tiebreaker puzzle ready to go. But other than that, you guys ready? Let's see who does better in this. So the first question being, who owns the record for the most runs batted in a single game by a Met? Seconds.
I got it.
This guy hit a lot of dingers. Question number 2, who struck out to end Yohan Santana's no-hitter against the Cardinals back in 2012? There's also some speculation about this one not being a no-hitter. For those who watched it live, you'd know why. First no-hitter in Mets history, where Mike Baxter sacrificed his life, his entire career, for this no-hitter. Question number 3, it's more of a clue. This late game slap hitter was nicknamed Le Grande Orage for his ginger hair and big game presence. This guy actually passed away on the day of 2018 opening day for the Mets, and I was at that game. Little fun fact that is just useless. Who is the all-time leader in games played for the Mets franchise? The Mets have been around for 60 years, not had many long-term pieces. Hopefully that will change. Question number 5. In 1978, the Mets traded longtime franchise face Jerry Koosman to the Minnesota Twins for what lefty reliever? Question number 6. In the first regular season game ever played at Citi Field, Mike Pelfrey surrendered a leadoff home run to who?
This is the first Citi Field one?
The first ever batter of Citi Field's existence. The Mets closing Shea Stadium, being the Mets and choking in 08, and opening it like the Mets in 09. Question number 7. In Game 3 of the 1973 NLCS, Pete Rose squared off in a benches-clearing brawl with this all-star infielder. In 1983, the Mets traded pitchers Neil Allen and Rick Ownby for this former MVP and World Series champion. Question number 9 being after the 1986 World Series, third baseman Ray Knight, who just won the World Series MVP, in free agency went to what team? Ray Knight scored the winning run in Game 6, the infamous Game 6. Ray Knight is also a great Christian man. He is a man of God. And the final question, number 10, who is the only Met to homer twice in a World Series game?
Oh, God.
Gross.
Oh, I know that reaction. I know what that means. All right. How do you guys think you did?
I did terrible.
You did terrible?
I think I got 8 or 9.
I think I got 1.
Okay. So the confidence levels are at 2 different spots right now. So, who owns the record for the most runs batted in a single game by a Met? Frank, what did you answer?
I put Edgardo Alfonso. I felt like he had to have done something memorable.
Okay. Tony?
Carlos Delgado.
Carlos Delgado is correct. That's 1 for Tony. All right. Question number 2. Who struck out to end Yohan Santana's no-hitter against the Cardinals back in 2012? Tony, what'd you answer?
Scott Rowland.
Okay. Frank?
I had Lance Berkman. I don't think Roland was still with them at that time.
Neither of those are correct. David Freese is the correct
Oh,
I know it was a righty.
the postseason hero.
Yeah, wow.
Finisher.
How about that?
This late game slap hitter was nicknamed Le Grande Orange for his ginger hair and big game presence. Frank, what'd you put?
I had Rusty Staub. I don't feel confident in it, but I put Rusty.
Okay. Tony?
Rusty Staub.
Rusty Staub. Rusty Staub is correct. Both get the point.
Okay.
2-1, Tony. The all-time leader in games played for the Mets franchise. Tony, what'd you put?
Ed Kranepool.
Frank?
Yeah, I put Cleon Jones, but Kranepool is a really good choice.
Kranepool is correct.
Yeah.
3-1, Tony. His confidence definitely is paying off so far. In 1978, the Mets traded a longtime franchise face, Jerry Koosman, to the Minnesota Twins because they don't know how to keep anyone for what? Lefty reliever. Tony?
The man that would close the 1986 World Series, Jesse Orosco.
That's what I had as well.
Jesse Orosco, and that is correct.
Yes.
4-2, Tony. Next question being, in the first regular season game ever played at Citi Field, Mike Pelfrey surrendered a lead-off home run to who? Frank, what'd you put?
I know this isn't the answer, but I know he did something big in Citi Field. I just put Mark Reynolds just because he always had home runs against the Mets.
That's a decent answer. Tony?
We'll never forget it or where I was, my aunt's kitchen. Could not believe it. Jody Garrett.
Jody Garrett is correct. Gary Cohen, the first batter. In Game 3 of the 1973 NLCS, Pete Rose squared off in a benches-clearing brawl with this all-star infielder. Tony, what do you got?
That would be Long Island Duck former manager Bud Harrelson.
I had blank.
You had blank. Okay, Bud Harrelson is correct. 6-2, Tony. In 1983, the Mets traded pitchers Neil Allen and Eric Ownby for this former MVP and World Series champion. Frank?
Keith Hernandez.
Tony? Keith Hernandez. Keith Hernandez is correct. So every single one that Frank has gotten correctly, Tony has also got correct. So he cannot close the gap at all. Question number 9. After the 1986 World Series, third baseman Ray Knight left in free agency for what team? Tony?
Kind of a shot in the dark. I'm hoping the book I read from Mookie Wilson helps me here. Was it the San Francisco Giants?
Ooh, okay. Frank?
I put the Expos. I just put a random team.
The Baltimore Orioles is the correct
Okay.
answer. Yeah. The Orioles used to spend money. Isn't that crazy? All right. And then the final question. Who is the only Met to homer twice in a World Series game? Frank, would you like to answer this one?
Mediocre Mike.
I have no idea. You have to specify who that is.
Michael Conforto. Now
That's
Giants
an interesting answer.
Mid-Mike
Tony?
Conforto. Mid-Mike
Michael
Conforto.
Conforto is the correct answer. So it is 8-4. So you said you had one, Frank.
That I did better than I expected, so that's good. That's good for me.
Now it is time for rapid fire stories. The Nationals have signed former Met Dominic Smith to a 1-year deal worth up to $4 million with incentives. Smith was drafted in the first round of the 2013 MLB draft by the Mets and was with the organization ever since being non-tendered by the Mets this offseason. The Brewers have signed Alex Claudio to a minor league contract. The junk-throwing lefty made a few appearances for the Mets last season in their organization out of the bullpen. I kind of like this guy, so I'm kind of pissed off about it, to be honest. The Mets have signed Lorenzo Cedrola to a minor league contract as well. Cedrola is 24 years old and a former international signing by the Red Sox back in 2014. He spent his last 4 seasons in the Reds farm system, yet to make his major league debut. The Mets also signed left-handed reliever TJ McFarland to a minor league deal. McFarland is 33 years old and coming off a rough season in St. Louis, leading to him being DFA'd by the club last August. The Mets' number 3 overall prospect, Kevin Parada, will begin his 2023 season in High A Brooklyn for the Cyclones. Parada was one of the Mets' first-round picks in last year's draft out of Georgia Tech. The Mets have hired Eric Hinsky as their assistant hitting coach behind Jeremy Barnes, with Eric Chavez moving to bench coach, who is highly regarded as a future big league manager. Former Mets executive Omar Minaya has joined the Yankees as the special advisor to baseball operations. Minaya had multiple stints with the Mets organization in multiple positions, most known for his influence of constructing the beloved 2006 Mets team and having a huge hand in drafting franchise faces such as Jacob deGrom, Brandon Nimmo, and Matt Harvey. Dick Scott has been named the new manager of the AAA Syracuse Mets. Scott returned to the Mets coaching staff in 2021 as coordinator of coaching development and instruction. The Mets' number 7 overall prospect, Mark Vientos, will play for Team Nicaragua in the 2023 World Baseball Classic this spring. Vientos is now the 9th current Met to announce their participation in this year's tournament. Parting words for episode 4.
It's obvious. Get the Correa deal done. I mean, all Mets fans are tired of waiting. It's just very stressful. There's just a lot of anxiety, just constantly you just never know when's going to happen as far as is it official or is it not official? So just that waiting game. It's very painful for all the fans. So just get it done, guys. That's really all we could ask for. And then once they get that done, then we'll see if they make any other moves. We still see some kind of resolution with the Darren Ruff situation and if they could move him as well so they could free up that bench and if anything's going to happen in the Pro Farm Mancini market. There's just questions that still have to be answered, but nothing could be done until this Correa thing is official.
Get the Correa deal done. That's it.
Well said. Very simple. Yeah, I'm just ready to make some trades. I'm ready to ship some of this fat out of here of this team that does not belong here, such as Darren Ruff, and maybe finally get a resolution on what the future is going to be with Mark Vientos. There's some guys in this bullpen I'd love to move, but I don't think they're going to want to subtract some pitching. Get the damn Correa deal done. Just get us an answer at this point. That's all I really need, because this cannot go into 20 days and go into a month-long saga. 1 month in an off-season is way too much time for something to get figured out on one particular subject. But other than that, that is episode 4. We'll see you guys in episode 5 of the Mets Weekly podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. We just surpassed 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for that. There is more to come throughout the week. We also have some videos that come out. We do some live streams for breaking news. Follow us on TikTok for some clips that come out. Follow our new Twitter, which will get up and running. But other than that, we'll see you guys next time. Let's go Mets. Get this damn Correa thing done because it is just getting absolutely draining.